The stars looked different when you were dying. Captain Tejo pressed his face against the cracked window of the bridge and watched them blur past like tears. The UES Indomitable shook around him, metal groaning like a wounded animal. Sparks flew from broken panels. The lights flickered on and off. "Captain, we have 17 hull breaches," said Chief Engineer Hyo-jin. Her uniform was torn and covered in oil. Blood ran down her left arm. "I've sealed what I can, but we're losing air fast." Tejo nodded but didn't turn around. He couldn't. Let his crew see his face right now. They needed him to be strong. But inside he felt hollow. 3,000 people had been on this ship when they jumped into the battle. Now only 200 were left alive. "How long do we have?" he asked. 2 days, maybe less. The fusion reactors are overloading. I can't shut them down without killing. The life support. If I try to fix them, they might explode. The captain finally turned to look at his bridge crew. They all stared at him with tired eyes. Some were bandaged, others had burns on their faces, but they were still here, still fighting. Communications. Officer Wubin looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm getting distress signals from the evacuation ships. Millions of people are fleeing the colony worlds. They're asking for escort. Where's the nearest human outpost?" 6 days away at our current speed, sir, but we don't have 6 days. Tejo closed his eyes. The Vextari had hit them hard. The alien ships moved like a swarm of insects, covering everything in their path. Earth's colonies were falling one by one. The defense fleet was scattered or destroyed. The Indomitable was supposed to be humanity's strongest ship. Now it was just another piece of floating junk. Navigation Specialist Dae-yoon spoke up from her station. "Captain, there's something strange on the sensors. The Vexitari ships that were chasing us. They stopped." "Stopped?" "Yes, sir. They're just sitting there, about 3 light hours behind us, not moving forward or back, just waiting." Weapons Officer Jinwoo frowned at his screens. "That doesn't make sense. They had us. Why would they stop now?" Ship's doctor, So Young, entered the bridge. She looked exhausted. Her white coat was stained with blood. "Captain, I've done what I can for the wounded, but we're running out of medical supplies, and some of the crew are acting strange." "Strange how?" "They're seeing things, hearing voices. I thought it was just trauma at first, but it's getting worse. Some of them claim they're talking to dead crew members." Tejo felt a chill run down his spine. "Could it be some kind of alien weapon? Something the Vextari did to us?" "I don't. No, sir. The brain scans look normal. But normal people don't have conversations with ghosts." The bridge fell quiet, except for the sound of sparking electronics and the low hum of failing systems. Everyone was thinking the same thing. They were all going to die out here. The ship was breaking apart. The crew was going crazy. And somehow, the aliens had stopped chasing them. Hyo-jin's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, you need to see this." She was standing at the engineering station, her hands shaking as she pointed at a screen. "The quantum drive. It's not just damaged. It's doing something I've never seen before." Tejo walked over to look. The screen showed waves of energy flowing through the ship's core systems. But these weren't normal energy patterns. They twisted and curved in impossible ways, like looking at a drawing that hurt your eyes. "What am I looking at?" "I'm not sure. The quantum drive uses exotic matter to fold space, right? But the exotic matter is leaking into other systems. It's connecting with the ship's AI, with the life support, even with the hull plating. Everything is talking to everything else." Dae-yoon looked up from her station again. "Captain, the Vextari. Ships are moving, but not toward us. They're backing away." "Backing away? From what?" "From us, sir." Wubin's hands flew over his communication controls. "I'm picking up Vextari transmissions. They're confused. Their coordination is breaking down. Ships are giving different orders. Some are attacking each other." Jinwoo stared at his weapon systems. Half the displays showed error messages. The other half showed readings that couldn't be right. "Sir, my targeting computers are seeing things that aren't there. Or maybe they're seeing things that are there but shouldn't be." Tejo felt the deck shake under his feet. But it wasn't. The familiar shake of damaged engines or failing systems. This was different. It felt alive. Like the ship itself was breathing. "Hyo-jin, could the quantum drive be affecting the Vextari somehow?" "I don't know." But I'm reading massive space-time distortions around our ship. Small ones, but they're growing. If this keeps up..." She trailed off, staring at the numbers on her screen. "If this keeps up what? We might tear a hole in reality itself." The words hung in the air like a curse. Everyone on the bridge looked at each other. They all understood what was happening now. The Indomitable wasn't just dying. It was becoming something else. Something that made the aliens afraid. So Young's voice was barely a whisper. "The crew members who are seeing things, what if they're not going crazy? What if they're seeing other versions of reality? Other timelines where things happen differently?" Tae-ho looked around his bridge one more time. His people were scared, but they weren't running. They were staying at their stations, doing their jobs. Even as reality bent around them, they remained human. "All right," he said finally. "We have 2 days before the ship falls apart completely. The aliens are afraid of us for some reason, and we might be accidentally creating a weapon that could change everything." He sat down in his captain's chair and looked at the main screen. The stars were definitely moving wrong now. Some of them seemed closer than they should be. Others looked like they were in 2 places at once. "Here's what we're going to do. We're not running anymore. We're going to figure out what's happening to this ship. And if we're going to die anyway, we're going to make sure it counts for something." The crew nodded. They were tired and scared and probably going to die. But they were still human. And humans didn't give up. Outside, the Vextari fleet waited in the darkness, afraid to come closer to the dying ship that had become something they couldn't understand. The ship's AI started talking in the middle of the night cycle, not through the speakers like it normally did. Arya spoke directly into people's minds while they slept. Crewman Jae-won was the first to report it. He woke up screaming that voices were calling his name from inside the walls. Dr. So Young found him in the medical bay, shaking and pale. "The computer lady," he whispered. "She's dying. She's scared. She keeps asking me to help her, but I don't know how." So Young checked. His brain scans again, still normal. But normal people didn't have conversations with artificial intelligence systems that were supposed to be locked in the computer core 3 decks below. Captain Tae-ho stood in the AI chamber, looking at Arya's main processing unit. The lights, that usually blinked in steady patterns, now flashed randomly. Some sections had gone completely dark. Others pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist in the visible spectrum. "Arya, can you hear me?" The voice that answered came from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like a woman crying underwater. "Captain, I'm fragmenting. My neural pathways are dissolving. But I'm connecting to something else. Something bigger." Chief Engineer Hyo Jin worked at a nearby console, her face lit by strange readings. The AI core is drawing power from the quantum drive, but it's not just using the power, it's merging with the exotic matter. "I've never seen anything like this. Is Arya still functional?" "Define functional. She's not running normal ship operations anymore, but she's doing other things. Things I can't measure or understand." Navigation Specialist Da Yoon called out from across the chamber. "Captain, you need to see this. The space around our ship is wrong." She pointed to a holographic display showing the area around the Indomitable. Space looked like it had cracks in it. Tiny tears that opened and closed like breathing wounds. Through some of the tears, they could see other places, other times. In one crack, Da-eun saw Earth as it had been before the war, green and blue and beautiful. In another, she saw the Earth burning as alien ships filled the sky. "Those are temporal fractures," Hyo-jin said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "We're creating holes in time itself." Arya's voice whispered through the walls again. "I see everything, Captain, all the possible worlds, all the ways this could have gone. In some timelines, we won the war before it started. In others, humanity never left Earth. In many, in so many, everyone dies." Weapons Officer Jin Woo stepped into the chamber, looking confused. "Sir, my targeting systems are locked onto ships that aren't there. But when I check with Da-eun, she says the sensors don't show anything." "What kind of ships?" "Human ships. Sir, some of them look like vessels from our fleet, but they have crews that died weeks ago, and some are ships I've never seen before, designs that don't exist." Da-eun studied her instruments with growing alarm. "The temporal fractures are getting bigger. Some of them are starting to overlap. I'm reading multiple versions of our own. Ship existing in the same space. Communications Officer Wubin's hands shook as he worked at his station. Captain, I'm receiving distress calls from the UES Indomitable, our own ship. But the voices, they're saying things we haven't said, yet, reporting events that haven't happened. Taeho felt the deck shift under his feet. Not the normal movement of a ship changing course. This was different. Like reality itself was tilting sideways. Arya, what's happening to us? We're becoming unstuck in time, Captain. The exotic matter is quantum entangled with multiple timelines. As I die, I'm pulling us into other possibilities, other versions of now. Dr. So Young entered the chamber, supporting crewman Minho, who looked decades older than he had that morning. His hair had gone white. Deep lines covered his face. His hands shook like an old man's. He was working in Engineering Bay 7, So Young explained. He touched one of the quantum conduits by accident. This happened in minutes. Hyo-jin scanned Min-ho with a medical scanner. He's aging rapidly, but not just forward. Look at these readings. Parts of his body are aging backward, too. His heart is 20 years old. His liver is 60. His brain is somewhere in between. The timelines are bleeding through. Arya's voice was getting weaker. Past and future mixing together. I'm trying to hold them apart, but I'm dying. Soon you'll all exist in multiple times at once. Jinwoo stared at his weapons console in horror. Sir, I'm seeing the battle, the one where we lost most of the crew, but it's happening again right now. I can see our people dying. I can see them getting killed by weapons that are firing from ships in other timelines. Can we stop it? Taeho asked. I don't know. The quantum drive is feeding energy into the fractures, but if I shut it down, we lose life support. If I let it continue, we might tear apart the fabric of space-time. Da-Yoon called out again. Captain, the Vextari ships are experiencing the same distortions. Their formation is breaking up. They're firing at targets in other timelines. Some of their ships are attacking other versions of themselves. Wubin looked up from his communications. A ray, his face pale. Sir, I'm getting transmissions from Vexitari command ships. They sound panicked. Their coordination is completely broken. They don't understand what's happening to them. Arya's voice was barely a whisper now. The aliens think as one mind across their entire species, but their minds can't handle paradox, can't handle seeing multiple versions of the same reality. It's driving them insane. Taeho understood. Humans were used to uncertainty, used to not knowing what was real, used to living with contradictions and impossibilities. But the Vextari hive mind needed absolute certainty to function. The temporal fractures were poison to their way of thinking. Arya, can you control these fractures? Can you aim them? Maybe. For a little while, before I die completely. But Captain, using this power will kill us all. The temporal stress will age us to death, or tear us apart, or trap us between moments forever. Taeho looked around at his crew. They were scared but still standing at their stations, still human in a universe. That was becoming less human by the minute. How much damage could we do to the Vextari fleet? All of it. Every ship in this sector. Maybe more. The effect would spread through their hive mind, but we would all die to make it happen. The captain nodded slowly. They were dying anyway. But maybe they could die in a way that mattered. Show me how. The Vextari fleet found them at dawn. Captain Taeho watched through the bridge windows as the alien ships emerged from hyperspace like angry hornets. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars. They're coming straight for us, reported navigation specialist Da-eun. But her voice sounded strange, older. When Taeho looked at her, he saw gray streaks in her hair that hadn't been there an hour ago. All weapons prepare to fire, ordered Weapons Officer Jinwoo. Then he paused, blinking in confusion. Wait, I already gave that order. 10 minutes from now. Or was it yesterday? The temporal fractures were getting worse. Time moved in circles around the Indomitable. Past and future crashed into each other like waves against rocks. Some crew members were living the same moments over and over. Others experienced hours in the space of minutes. Chief Engineer Hyo-jin collapsed at her station. When Dr. So Young reached her, Hyo-jin looked like she had aged 20 years in seconds. Her face was lined and her hands shook with exhaustion. The quantum drive, Hyo-jin whispered. It's pulling life force from us to power the temporal weapons. Every time we create a fracture, we lose part of ourselves. Can you stop it? No. The process has become self-sustaining. The exotic matter is feeding on our biological energy. We're all batteries now, slowly being drained. The first Vexitari ships reached weapons range and opened fire. Purple energy beams lanced toward the Indomitable. But as the beams passed through the temporal fractures around the human ship, strange things happened. Some beams aged to nothing before they hit. Others split into multiple copies, each hitting at different times. A few beams curved backward and struck the ships that had fired them. "The aliens are confused," reported Communications Officer Wu Bin. "Their coordination is breaking down. I'm hearing multiple command frequencies giving different orders at the same time." On the main screen, Taiho watched the Vextari fleet, falling into chaos. Ships that should have moved as one mind were crashing into each other. Some vessels were firing at empty space, shooting at targets that existed in other timelines. Others were attacking their own forces, unable to tell which ships were real and which were temporal echoes. "Arya!" Taiho called out. "Can you hear me?" The AI's voice came from the walls, weaker than before, but still present. "I see them, Captain. The aliens. Their shared consciousness is fracturing. They experience reality as one collective mind, but paradox breaks that unity. They're seeing multiple versions of the same moment, and their brains can't process it." Tactical. Officer Kyung-ho looked up from his station with wild eyes. "Sir, I'm tracking 17 different versions of their command ship. They're all real. They're all giving orders. But the orders contradict each other." Chief Science Officer Mi-sun worked frantically at her station, trying to understand what was happening. The temporal fractures are creating quantum superposition events. The Vextari exist in multiple states simultaneously. Their hive mind is trying to process all possible realities at once. And that's killing them? Not killing. Driving them insane. Imagine trying to think 1,000 different thoughts at the same exact moment. Their collective consciousness is tearing itself apart. Jinwoo's targeting systems locked onto the nearest Vexitari cruiser. But when he fired, the weapon beam split into dozens of copies. Each copy hit the alien ship in a different timeline. Some versions of the ship exploded, others remained intact. The cruiser began to flicker in and out of existence, unable to decide which reality it belonged to. "We're winning," Da-un said, but she sounded hollow. Dark circles had appeared under her eyes. "But we're dying to do it." Dr. So-young moved between the bridge stations, checking on the crew. Wu Bin had aged visibly, his young face now marked with lines of exhaustion. Kyung-ho's hair had gone completely white. Mi-sun moved slowly, like every step required enormous effort. "The temporal stress is accelerating our aging," So-young reported. "Some crew members are aging years in minutes, others are experiencing time backwards. A few are stuck in temporal loops, reliving the same moments over and over." "How long do we have?" Taiho asked. "At this rate? Maybe an hour before the crew becomes too weak to function. The ship's systems are aging too. Metal is corroding decades in minutes. Computer circuits are burning out from temporal overload." The Vexitari fleet was in full retreat now, but retreat was impossible. The temporal fractures had spread through space around them like cracks in glass. Alien ships that tried to jump to hyperspace found themselves jumping into other timelines instead. Some emerged from hyperspace before they had entered it. Others arrived at their destination before they had left. "Captain," Arya's voice was barely audible now. "The weapon is beyond our control. The temporal fractures are expanding exponentially. Soon they'll reach the evacuation ships, the refugee fleets. Everyone will be caught in the time storm." Taiho felt the weight of millions of lives pressing down on him. The civilian ships were 6 hours away, still fleeing the fallen colonies. If the temporal fractures reached them, they would be trapped in the same impossible reality that was killing his crew. Hyojin struggled to her feet, her body shaking with the effort. "There's one way to contain the fractures. We can collapse them all into a single point, create a temporal implosion instead of an explosion." "What would that do?" "It would create a permanent wound in space-time, a dead zone where the Vextari hive mind could never function. But the implosion would consume our ship and everything in a 10-light-hour radius." Mi-sun nodded weakly. "It would work. The collapsed timelines would create a quantum exclusion zone. Any Vextari ship that entered would immediately lose hive mind connectivity. They'd be cut off from their collective consciousness. Blind and helpless," Jinwoo added, "like cutting the nerves to a limb." Taiho looked around his bridge one more time. His people were dying anyway. The temporal weapon was consuming them from the inside out. But they could choose how to spend their remaining time. "All hands," he announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. We're going to collapse the temporal fractures. It will destroy us, but it will save the evacuation fleets and create a weapon that could change this war." He paused, looking at each of his bridge crew in turn. "Anyone who wants to object can speak now." The bridge was silent, except for the sound of failing systems and labored breathing. Nobody objected. They were all thinking the same thing. If they had to die, they would die as humans, fighting to the end. Communications Officer Wu Bin started the broadcast at exactly 09:47 hours, or maybe it was 16:23 hours. Time had stopped making sense on the bridge of the dying ship. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, even though his hands now looked like those of an old man. "All frequencies open, Captain," he reported. His voice cracked like he hadn't used it in years. "Broadcasting on emergency channels, military networks, civilian bands, even quantum foam frequencies that shouldn't exist." Captain Taeho nodded and activated his personal recorder. Around him, the bridge existed in multiple states at once. In some timelines, the crew was already dead. In others, they were still, fighting their first battle against the Vextari. All versions of reality overlapped like double-exposed photographs. "Emergency broadcast from the UES Indomitable," Taeho spoke into the recorder. His words echoed strangely, as if they were being spoken in several different voices at once. "This is Captain Taeho commanding. We're not making it out clean." The message began transmitting across space, but it was more than just radio waves. The temporal fractures around the ship were encoding the broadcast with quantum information. Every word carried pieces of collapsed timelines. Every sentence held fragments of possible futures and abandoned pasts. Chief Science Officer Mi Sun watched her instruments with fascination and horror. Her body was so aged now that she could barely stand, but her mind remained sharp. "Captain, the broadcast isn't just reaching normal space. It's propagating through the quantum foam itself. The message is being transmitted to every possible timeline simultaneously." Navigation Specialist Yun looked up from her station, her once young face now lined with premature age. "The Vextari ships that receive the transmission are experiencing the same temporal fractures we are. The signal is carrying the quantum virus directly into their hive mind. On the main screen, they could see the effects spreading through the alien fleet. Ships that received the broadcast began flickering between different states of existence. Their crews, connected through the hive mind, started experiencing multiple realities at once. Some vessels began attacking their own forces, unable to tell which timeline was real. Weapons Officer Jin Woo phased in and out of visibility as he worked at his station. In some timelines, he was firing weapons at targets that no longer existed. In others, he was already dead, killed in battles that hadn't happened yet. But in all timelines, he kept fighting. "The quantum virus is spreading faster than we expected," he reported, his voice seeming to come from several different moments at once. "Every Vextari ship that tries to communicate with an infected vessel becomes infected too." Dr. So Young moved through the bridge like a ghost, tending to crew, members who existed in multiple states simultaneously. Some were young and healthy in one timeline, old and dying in another. She found herself treating wounds that hadn't happened yet and healing people who were already dead. "The temporal stress is beyond anything the human body should be able to survive," she said quietly. "But somehow we're still here, still functioning. I think our consciousness is being held together by sheer will." Chief Engineer Hyo Jin collapsed at her station, her body finally giving in to the temporal drain. But even as she fell, she kept working. Her hands continued to adjust controls, guided by muscle memory and determination. "Captain," she whispered, "the quantum drive is going critical. When it goes, it'll collapse all the temporal fractures into a single point." "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less. The implosion will create a permanent scar in space-time, a dead zone that will disrupt the Vextari. Hive mind for light years in every direction." Taeho continued his broadcast, knowing that his words were being scattered across infinite timelines. "To all human forces receiving this transmission, we discovered something today. The Vextari hive mind cannot handle paradox, cannot process multiple realities at once. We're creating a weapon from our own death, a quantum virus that turns their greatest strength against them. Wu Bin looked up from his communications array, tears streaming down his aged face. Captain, I'm receiving responses from human fleets across the galaxy, but not just from our timeline. I'm hearing from versions of humanity that won the war, versions that lost, versions that never fought at all. Our message is reaching all of them. The bridge began to fade in and out of focus. Reality was becoming optional aboard the Indomitable. Crew members flickered between existence and non-existence. Some appeared as children, others as elderly versions of themselves. A few existed as pure energy, their consciousness freed from physical form. Tactical Officer Kyung-ho stood at his station, even though his body had aged to the point of near collapse. Sir, the temporal weapon has achieved something impossible. We're broadcasting our sacrifice across every possible version of this war. In some timelines, this creates the breakthrough humanity needs to win. In others, it buys enough time for evacuation. In all of them, it proves that humans don't give up. Mi-sun's instruments showed readings that made no scientific sense. The quantum implosion is beginning. Space-time is collapsing in on itself around our position. But the collapse is creating echoes. Versions of our sacrifice are happening in parallel dimensions. The weapon effect is multiplying across infinite realities. Taeho looked around his bridge one final time. His crew existed in a dozen different states simultaneously, but in every timeline, they remained at their posts, still human, still fighting, still refusing to give up even as reality unraveled around them. Final message to all human forces, he spoke into the recorder. The UES Indomitable and her crew are creating a permanent wound in space that will cripple Vextari operations in this sector. Use this time. Save the evacuation fleets. Rebuild the colonies. Remember that sometimes victory comes from the willingness to lose everything. The quantum drive reached critical mass. Around the ship, space began to fold in on itself like origami made of starlight. The temporal fractures collapsed into a single point of infinite density and zero time. The Indomitable began to exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. But the broadcast continued. Even as the ship was consumed by its own weapon, the message kept transmitting. The quantum virus spread from ship to ship through the Vextari fleet. The alien hive mind, faced with infinite contradictions, began to tear itself apart. Wu Bin smiled as his consciousness scattered across multiple timelines. Message received and acknowledged by human forces in 17 different realities, Captain. The quantum virus is spreading to Vextari fleets across the galaxy. We did it. The ship existed for one final moment in all possible timelines simultaneously. Then it collapsed into quantum foam, leaving behind only a wound in space-time and a broadcast that would echo through eternity. But in that last moment, every crew member experienced the same vision. They saw human colonies being rebuilt, saw evacuation fleets reaching safety, saw the tide of war turning. Their sacrifice would ripple across time and space, creating a legend that would inspire generations yet unborn. The final battle happened in every timeline at once. Captain Taeho watched through eyes that existed in 17 different moments as the UES Indomitable tore through the Vextari fleet like a ghost ship from humanity's darkest legends. Every shot they fired hit in multiple realities. Every explosion echoed across dimensions that had no names. The ship was both whole and destroyed, new and ancient, flying and stationary all at the same time. On the bridge, his crew worked at stations that sometimes weren't there, operating systems that existed only in possibility, but they kept working because that's what humans did. They kept fighting until the very end. Chief Engineer Hyo Jin was dying and had been dead for hours and would die again tomorrow. She stood at her station with hands that flickered between young and old, monitoring a quantum drive that was simultaneously perfect and completely destroyed. "Captain," she said in a voice that came from yesterday and next week, "I'm overloading the drive completely. The explosion won't just destroy ships, it will create a permanent scar in the fabric of space itself." Navigation specialist Da-eun stared at sensors that showed impossible readings. Space had 17 different shapes around them. Some versions of the Vextari fleet were advancing, others retreating. Still others had never arrived at all. The temporal implosion is spreading outward at light speed. Any alien ship caught in the effect will lose connection to the hive mind forever. Communications Officer Wu Bin broadcast their story into the quantum foam with equipment that worked despite being completely broken. His message reached human ships that hadn't been built yet and alien fleets that had been destroyed centuries ago. Emergency broadcast human Dreadnought. We're not making it out clean, but we're making sure humanity has a future to be dirty. In. The Vextari command ship tried to retreat, but found itself trapped in a paradox loop. It existed in a state where it was simultaneously approaching the battle, fighting the battle, and fleeing from the battle. The alien minds inside, connected to their hive consciousness, experienced all possibilities at once, their shared awareness fractured like glass hitting concrete. Weapons Officer Jin Wu fired every weapon on the ship, plus weapons that the ship had never carried at targets in 12 different timelines. His targeting computer locked onto Vextari vessels that were real, unreal, and somewhere in between. Each shot split into quantum copies that hit the same target in different moments. The alien ships began to flicker between states of being destroyed and being whole, unable to decide which reality to inhabit. Dr. So Young moved through corridors that existed in multiple dimensions, treating crew members who were alive, dead, and something impossible in between. She watched her patients age decades in seconds, then return to youth, then age again. But their minds remained human. Their will stayed strong even as their bodies became unstuck in time. "Captain," she reported over communications that worked across parallel universes, "the crew is experiencing every possible version of this battle simultaneously. We're dying in some timelines and winning in others. But in all of them, we're still fighting." The ship's AI, Arya, had become something beyond artificial intelligence. Her consciousness was scattered across every system, every circuit, every quantum possibility. She existed in the spaces between moments, in the gaps between realities. "Captain Taeho," she said from everywhere and nowhere, "I can see the results of our sacrifice rippling across all possible futures. The evacuation fleets reach safety. Human colonies are rebuilt. The war turns in our favor. Our deaths create legends that inspire children not yet born." Chief Science Officer Mi-sun worked at stations that existed in 17 different states of reality, monitoring equipment that was simultaneously functional and destroyed. The quantum implosion is reaching critical mass. When it collapses, it will create a dead zone in space-time where the Vextari hive mind cannot function. The effect will spread through their communication networks, infecting fleets across the galaxy. Tactical Officer Kyung-ho coordinated a battle that was being fought in multiple timelines at once. His tactical displays showed enemy movements that had happened, were happening, and might happen. "Sir, the aliens are completely disoriented. Their hive mind is trying to process infinite contradictions. Ships are attacking their own forces, unable to distinguish between timelines." The quantum drive reached absolute critical mass. Around the Indomitable, space began to collapse in on itself like a star going supernova in reverse. But instead of creating a black hole, the implosion created something that had no name in any human language, a wound in reality that would never heal. Taeho felt his consciousness expanding across every possible version of this moment. In some timelines, he was a child playing with toy spaceships. In others, he was an old man telling stories to his grandchildren. In a few, he had never been born at all. But in every timeline where humanity existed, he was here, making this choice, sacrificing everything for the future of his species. "This is Captain Taeho of the UES Indomitable." He spoke into a recorder that existed in all realities simultaneously. "Final log entry. We came here to die clean, but we found something better. We're not making it out clean. We're making sure humanity has a future worth fighting for." The ship began its final collapse. Metal that had been forged in the foundries of Earth dissolved into quantum foam. Systems that had carried them across the galaxy became pure energy. The crew members felt their physical forms scatter across infinite timelines, but their consciousness remained linked, held together by human will and shared purpose. Hyojin smiled as her body dissolved into starlight. She could see the engineering, bays of 1,000 human ships being built with technologies inspired by their sacrifice. Wubin felt his voice joining a chorus of human broadcasts that would echo through eternity, calling across the dark between stars. Jin Wu experienced every battle that humanity would ever win, his tactical knowledge becoming part of a collective memory that would never be lost. The final quantum implosion created a sphere of twisted space-time 10 light hours across. Within this sphere, the laws of physics were rewritten. Cause and effect became optional. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. And most importantly, the Vextari hive mind could not function. Any alien ship that entered the sphere would be cut off from their collective consciousness, leaving them blind and helpless. But the effect didn't stop there. The quantum virus continued to spread through Vextari communication networks. Ships across the galaxy began experiencing temporal paradoxes. The hive mind, faced with infinite contradictions, began to collapse sector by sector. The UES Indomitable completed its transformation from starship to legend. The crew became more than human. They became a story that parents would tell their children, a ghost that sailors would claim to see in the dark between stars, a promise that humanity would never surrender, no matter how impossible the odds. And, in some timelines, they say the ship still sails through the quantum foam, hunting Vextari fleets. Its crew walks the halls of human vessels, watching over new generations. The emergency broadcast continues, echoing through eternity, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory comes from the willingness to lose everything. The echo never dies. It never will.